Medfield TV, community shows.
Welcome everybody, this is the Board of Selectmen's meeting for January 8th,
She didn't give me permission, I just nudged her.
2019. Rachel was just taking control of the meeting.
You have an open spot up there, you know.
Let's see, we're going to report that Mike Marcucci is not, he's participating remotely this evening. This is Mike this evening. Welcome, Mike. And we remind everybody that video recording is taking place, and we'll start with a moment of appreciation for our troops serving in the Middle East. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just also as a reminder, all votes, they will have to be by roll call.
Okay.
Even routine procedural votes.
So, am I supposed to be elected to chair the meeting, or just?
I don't think that's necessary.
But the clerk of the selectmen recognizes Selectman Peterson as the acting chairman tonight and make sure that all votes are roll call votes.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see, we start with an appointment at 7 o'clock, public hearing, Eversource Electric Company petition to install one new utility pole at 71 North Street. Chris Cosby is representing Eversource. Thank you. Yes, if you could, the microphone at the podium will allow the people at home to hear what you're saying. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Christine Cosby, Eversource Energy, and we are requesting permission for grant a location to install a new pole for 1 over 11A on North Street in Medfield. And the purpose of this new pole would be to provide electric service to the new apartment building, the 8-unit apartment building at 71 North Street.
Any questions?
Is the power on the main line is on that same side of the street? Crossing on North Street?
No, it's on the same side.
So is the need for the pole because of the number of the 8 lines running into the building, or is it a tension issue or required?
It's a tension span issue,
Okay.
as well as it will create private property wire crossings on the lots on either side if we go off of one of the other poles on either side.
Well, the pole on 67 is owned by the same owner. That helps you avoid another pole.
Oh, I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Don't have any questions?
Mr. Marcucci, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Comments from the public? This is a hearing, right?
Yes.
Any public comments, questions? Hearing none, do we have a motion
I'll
to?
move that we approve Eversource's request to place a pole on North Street in the area so designated on the map that they provided with the application.
Second.
Selectman Marcucci, this is a roll call
Aye.
vote. Selectman
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes,
and Selectman Murphy, aye, carries.
very good.
Got the first one done, right?
Yeah, it's our first remote vote, that's excellent.
On the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. We do have a 7:30 appointment with Dr. Jeffrey Marsden, and so we'll just hold on that. Citizen comment, I don't see anybody signed up, and it doesn't look like we have any, so we'll go on to our action items. Gene Minio requests the Selectmen vote to authorize Selectman Murphy, clerk of the board, to sign updated letter addressed to the Mass Historical Commission in regard to the chapel and infirmary building at the state hospital site. Gene, did you want to present anything on this, or anything
Happy to
further?
answer questions. It's just,
Could you just use the microphone, please?
it's just part of the historic tax credit application to the state. They have 3 deadlines a year. We'll be applying at each one of those over the course of several years in order to get the full allocation. We had the first application last August. It was rejected with minimal comment on a stair and a railing. We're addressing that, and we'll resubmit for the January deadline. So they have requested updated letters of support. So I think it's, it's basically the same letter with a new date.
This sounds like it's the first of a series that you'll have
Yep.
to have us for each submission for.
Right.
Mike, were you able to hear that well enough?
Yes, I was.
Good, excellent, thank you. Any further questions?
Okay, you ready?
Sure.
Okay. I move that the selectmen vote to authorize me to sign the letter confirming the selectmen's support for the grant application that the Cultural Alliance of Medfield is submitting for the Arts and Culture Center up at the State Hospital.
Second.
Roll call vote. Chairman Marcucci, you're still chairman.
Aye.
Selectman Peterson.
Yes.
Selectman Murby. Aye. Carries.
Our next action item is 2 letters of resignation received from Conservation Commission members Ralph Parmagine, 25-year member, started in 1993, and from Philip Burr. Phil started in 1999, a 19-year member, so that's over 40 years of Conservation Commission experience between the two of them. That's unfortunate.
That's a well-deserved rest they're getting.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
They've done a great job for
Yeah.
them.
Speaking personally, I didn't know Ralph Parmesan other than through the Conservation Commission, but, and I haven't gone to a whole lot of the meetings that he's run, but I have not been to a single meeting chaired by Ralph Parmesan that I did not thoroughly enjoy. So I'm sorry that he's resigning, but appreciate everything he's done for the town, and as well as Phil Burr.
Let's see, our next action.
Do we have to accept that, or it doesn't take long?
Here you can just accept the resignation, and then we'll announce that we'll have openings on the Conservation Commission for people. And actually, I should also announce we're going to have a resignation from the Council on Aging, so we also have an opening on that board as well.
Okay.
Let's see, our next action item is a vote to authorize the chairman to sign.
Just simply vote to accept the resignations. That's
We do
been
have
the
to-
practice, even though you don't really have
All
to.
right,
Formal vote. So I move that we vote to accept the resignations of Ralph Parmesan and Phil Burr from the Conservation Commission.
Second.
Roll call vote. Chairman Marcucci.
Aye.
Selectman Peterson.
aye.
Selectman Murphy. Aye.
Our next item is a vote to authorize a chairman to sign new building official certification form for Gary Pelletier, our new building commissioner.
This is a document required by the state to ensure that the building commissioner you hired is actually a certified building commissioner and is only working currently within the town of Medfield.
So not that I'm signing this, because it's the chairman, so is it Mike that will sign it or Pete that will sign it tonight?
Pete's going to sign it tonight.
He's going to sign it tonight. So for your benefit, Pete, when I read this, I had 2 questions. One, I assume that the yes box, or the box that says yes in the upper section there is the new employee certified as a building official in which the appointment is for. The answer is yes. Therefore makes the box that says to be completed by a new employee conditional inspector not already certified as building code enforcement official. That's why that's blank? Okay. And then the only other issue that I noted was that in signing this, you're confirming that you've read and that you understand the minimum requirements of MGL C-143, Section 3, regarding qualifications for building code enforcement officials, and you're attesting the fact that the candidate herein identifies or meets and exceeds such qualifications for the position. So if it had been me signing it, I haven't seen the law and I haven't seen the qualifications.
Well, I'm an attorney, so I know that stuff.
Very good. So should I make a motion?
It's our 3rd inspector in 2 years. And he promises he'll stay a while.
Good.
So we ready?
So do we have the motion then?
I move that we authorize Acting Chairman Peterson to sign the building official certification form that is required by the state for our new building inspector.
Commissioner.
Second.
Building Commissioner,
Building
correction. Seconded by Chairman Marcucci. Roll call vote, Chairman Marcucci.
Aye.
Selectman Peterson.
Yes.
Selectman Murby, aye.
Our next item on our action list is a request to appoint Nate Bazinet to the Safety Committee. And Nate is here.
Anything you want to say?
Is it on? Is it on?
Thanks for having me this evening. This opportunity kind of arose out of my citizen comment period, and I'd very much like to assist the town in any way I can. Certainly provided a resume to the Board of Selectmen, and just want to read off a couple of the goals that I had. Were just to draw on my experience in a variety of industries and as a stay-at-home parent to provide creative and proactive solutions and a collaborative team environment. To prioritize a culture of safety with a foundational emphasis on the most vulnerable members of our community, including but not limited to the disabled, children, and seniors, with the aim of implementing simple, cost-effective, and ultimately scalable outcomes. And to positively support the Safety Committee, Board of Selectmen, Town Administration in achieving thoughtful, responsible, and interconnected safety recommendations to benefit the people who live, work, learn, worship, and converge in the town of Medfield. Thank you.
Thank you so much for volunteering and for stepping forward.
The only comment, I'd endorse that, and also the only comment I'd make in looking at your background, although I realize you haven't got a background directly in safety, it seemed to me the technical background you had with hazardous materials would suggest to me you probably have a good mind for the issue of safety and the kind of mindset it takes to make good decisions. So appreciate you volunteering.
Thank you.
I would say my only comment was, after reading Nate's supplemental email about some of his other certifications, that we may also want to share his resume with Frank Perry and the Wildlife Management Committee as well.
I had the same thought.
Yeah. You know, are you part of the hunting in town already or not?
I have been up to the state property up off of 27.
There is a very active group in town that is hunting on town lands, and they are looking for assistance if you'd be interested in doing that. I know that Frank is really looking for help with doing it.
I'd certainly look into that, definitely.
Okay, I'll send you along his contact information.
This was the committee that was the Lyme Disease Committee that basically recommended to basically disband as a Lyme Disease Committee, but they morphed into a Wildlife Management Committee concerned with any wildlife management issues in town, I think, are going to be handled by that committee.
Oh, great.
And you have trapping certification, so
I do, and I have a trapper registration number also, so just have to get that active again.
The hunting that is done on town land is bow hunting.
Correct,
There's
yes.
no shotguns or anything, or rifles, or it's all bow hunting. Just they sit in a tree and wait for the deer to come up. Yeah.
Call it blind.
So do we have a motion?
I move that we accept Nathan Bazinet's request to become a member of the Safety Committee.
Second.
Roll call vote. Chairman Marcucci.
Aye.
Selectman Peterson.
Yes.
Selectman Murby. Aye. Carries. Thank you very much.
We have, let's see, pending is Townwide Master Planning Committee Charter and appointment of members. And I guess we're going to do half of that tonight. Do we have any further comments on the charter that Gus had tweaked?
I was fine with it. I think when we accept the changes, there's probably some formatting cleanup to do.
Yeah.
But I'm fine with the substance. I think given the timing, we'll probably want to change the date of the expected first meeting until February, since we won't be appointing the members until next week.
Yep.
But other than that, I'm fine, and I think we should go ahead and adopt the charter with the change of the date and the formatting changes.
Yep, I had the same feelings, that it's ready to go, and we just need to tweak the dates. So,
So the action on that, I have electronic version, you have it at this stage of the game. Do you all want to take it and reformat it, or do you want me to take it and reformat it?
I'm not sure who you're asking, but I
I
don't.
was asking Christina and Evelyn.
We'll take care of
You're
it.
gonna take care
If you
of it.
send it
Okay.
to me, we'll take care of it.
I think,
Do I
okay,
have
did I not?
I don't know if I have the final version with your edits.
It should be version 3. If I didn't send it to you, in fact, I did. It
Okay.
just went out to you on Sunday, I think it was. Mike has it, you have it, Mark has it. Evelyn, I didn't copy you just because I figured if I got it that far, you'd get it. But you should have it. It went out to me, it went out to you on the 6th.
Okay.
Okay. If you need it, though, I can send it to you again.
And then, you want to hold off on appointing the members? is
We're
that-
going to move appointing the members to the 15th.
Okay.
So, ready? Yes.
Yeah, just on that, because with the appointments, we've got to have the names in the agenda, and we're also waiting on a recommendation for a warrant committee representative, which we don't have.
Okay. So did you want to make a motion then, Gus, about the
Yes. So
charter?
I move that we adopt the charter for the Medfield Townwide Master Planning Committee as reflected in the third revision of our draft, with the stipulation that we'll change the first meeting to a date in February in light of the fact that we haven't adopted it until just now, and that we will do some formatting changes just to get into better shape.
Second.
Roll call vote. Chairman Marcucci.
Aye.
Selectman Peterson.
Yes.
Selectman Murby, aye. Okay.
And I would just request that once that is formatted, if we could get that posted to the website with a note. I don't think we yet have 15 potential candidates, so that it's still open for people who are interested to send an email with their resume and express interest in serving on the committee. I know there's at least one person who is waiting to see the charter, and there may be more as well.
And Christine, you may, or maybe Mike, you know, my tally is we have there's room for 7 at-large members. I think I only know of 3 names. So there's actually 4 open slots. Okay.
I think that's right.
Okay.
So that's 3 groups that need members, the Concom, the Council on Aging, and the Master Planning Committee. Town Administrator updates. Mike, Chris?
Yeah, a few things. We had a power outage this afternoon. It was affected quite a bit of the town. Do you know, Chris, whether everyone's back now?
I don't think everybody's back yet. NSTART originally said, Eversource said everybody would be back by 6:30, but I don't believe everybody's been restored yet.
Okay.
So.
It affected large areas of the town, Pine Street, North Street. It was down on Gary Drive, so there was a lot of... Some of the areas came back very quickly. They were only out 10 or 15 minutes. We have no idea what caused the outage, but it was... we were getting a lot of calls in about it, obviously. Our new facilities manager is on board. She was the assistant facilities manager in Dedham. She started a few weeks ago, and Chris can fill you in on more information. We had a little crisis here Friday with our boiler, so she was very helpful in working on that. So, and we're still trying to figure that one out. We've had another resignation from the warrant committee. Jack Wolf is resigning. So that will be 6 new members of the 9. There's only 3 original left on the warrant committee, so it's going to be an interesting year. Our assistant town accountant is also leaving same day I do. He's been going to a town accountant's position in Mansfield, which is where he lives. So.
That's Matt that's leaving?
Matt, yes, I know. It's a big loss. He's been terrific, yeah. So,
Gus and I went to a MMA meeting where they talked about the town accountant being one of the really seminal positions to fill in the town.
it's really tough, yeah. They're very tough, yes. And Joy has been out for a while, so it's a particularly difficult time, but he's willing to work with us and work on weekends and whatnot until she's back full time. I talked to our beaver trapper, and he said he's been unable to trap any beavers because the beavers are inactive because the water levels are so high they can't build whatever they huts, I think they call them, because lodges, okay, because the water will get into them. So he hasn't. And now this is under state law. This is the trapping season from, I think, December 1st to April or May 1st. And unfortunately, without being able to trap any, it's, if the beaver population may be exploding, so we don't know.
Nothing worse than exploding beavers.
And we had some pothole problems, which I think Mo talked to you last week about that. He did send me this morning a copy of some new Department of Transportation regulations, which basically seems to me like the state of Massachusetts wants to take over the highway system, whether they own it or not, and tell us what we can do and what we can't do. They're regulating the hours when you can shut down roads, what lanes you can shut down, whether you can put risers on manholes, how many inches you have to put on sidewalks. It's unbelievable, the regulations. I gave Gus a copy, and I'll have a copy for you to take a look at. And I think if we meet with our reps and senator, we ought to discuss that with them, as well as I have heard that the legislature is going to consider a new tax for transportation. And I think we need to talk to our representatives about that, because no matter how much money you dump into the T, you will never correct their problems until you correct their labor and their personnel problems. And just dumping money after equipment and fancy schemes isn't going to take care of the problem. And I don't know how prepared the legislature is to deal with the personnel issues at the T. It's my parting shot at the T, I guess. So, and that's about it, I think. So that's.
Mike, what was the pothole thing that Mo was talking about? I'm not sure that I knew about that.
There were some potholes that appeared on the bridge, on the westerly side of 109, right on the bridge itself.
Oh.
Now, the bridge is the only piece of road in the town of Medfield that is owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. All the rest are town roads. So a couple of people who lost their tires hitting the potholes, I guess they were quite severe, called the town and wanted the town to replace their tires. And Mo said, call the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because we have letters from them acknowledging that they own the bridge. So he wanted permission to patch, because if we went in and patched the potholes, we would assume responsibility for anything further without their permission. So it's a strange situation where everyone thinks Route 109, Route 27 are state roads. They are state numbered roads. They are not state roads. And it's only that bridge. They say they don't own the West Street Bridge. They may own the bridge over the railroad tracks at Curve Street. I think any railroad track, any bridge that goes over railroad track is a state responsibility. Anything that goes at grade level is the town's responsibility.
So it's the state.
You can't do anything without the railroad.
Right, yeah.
So has the state fixed the potholes at this point?
I don't believe they have. They came in, we had a problem on the eastbound side, and we alerted them to it, and they came and put some cones around it. And the cones blew,
Cones are back.
but they blew away, and they, and the highway would go down and replace them, and they'd blow away again, so, I don't know.
At present, there are cones having just driven down here tonight.
Well, there wasn't much wind today either, so I don't know. Maybe they put some weights on them or something too, but anyhow, that's...
Mike, you'll know this, what's the anomaly about the bridge over 109? Not over 109, I'm sorry, the bridge over the Charles at Route 27. Is it the fact that both sides of the bridge are in Medfield or something like that?
No, it's split between the two towns, but they say when that bridge was built, there was originally, there was another bridge up near where the railroad trestle is. And when they redid West Street, I don't know, 50 years ago, they relocated West Street. See, that bridge is actually called Bridge Street because Bridge Street, there was no West Street down at that end of West Street. You went from 109 up Bridge Street and then across because the river was too wide at 109 to cross at the time. So they went up Bridge and it was a smaller crossing. So when that road, West Street, was relocated and rebuilt, the state funded the building of the bridge for the two towns and then when they finished it, they turned it over to the two towns. So they claim that we own it. Even though, from what I can see, just about every other bridge in the state that crosses a river between two towns is owned by the state. But that's another thing we need to talk to our legislators about. I think it gets at least 8,000 cars a day. It's a commuter road. It's not a town road. That's a commuter road. And I said to Mo, well, maybe we ought to just shut it down because it's the people that are commuting that use that road. And if it was shut down within 2 days, the state would be out saying, okay, we'll do it. But as long as somebody else will do it for them, it's too bad. So, but
Okay, thank you. Selectmen reports. Mr. Marcucci?
I have none, but I greatly enjoyed Christmas and New Year's.
how are things in New York City?
So far, so good.
Good.
The train was on time.
That is a good sign. Huh?
Obviously not the T.
Gus?
So, well, I actually have several items at 7:30. I don't know if you
Oh,
want to-
okay, all right, so we'll take the superintendent. Dr. Jeffrey Marsden is here to talk about
How's that for being on time?
Massachusetts School Building Association Feasibility Study Agreement regarding Dale Street School. Thank you for coming, Jeff.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity this evening. Typically, when I come to you for MSBA issue, it's just for your blessing and your signature. This is no different. I think Mike, Mr. Marcucci, received a letter in early December highlighting the MSBA feasibility study agreement, and we have a deadline in order to send that to them. On December 12th, Christine, Mike Quinlan, the chair, Anna Mae O'Shea Brook, Michael LaFrancesca, and myself went to the MSBA meeting where they approved this next phase in the feasibility, next phase in the project for the feasibility study. We were originally scheduled for February or April, but we got all of our documents in on time, and we were a little bit ahead of the game in that regard. So they contacted us at the end of November and asked if we wanted to be on the agenda for December to kind of get that moving. So it worked out well for us. They approved it that day, and now we're just waiting to go into the next phase.
Jeff, could you just briefly clarify the first phase, the purpose of first phase versus second phase?
Sure.
That means.
So that first phase that we went through was really just identifying the need for a new school. So they go through that whole process. Remember, you folks with the SOI, the statement of interest, and all of that. So they go through that whole process, and then we get selected to be in the program. We're in the program now through phase one, which they try to establish enrollment for schools. They try to establish the need, whether looking at renovation, building new, all that kind of stuff. I think one of the things that came out of that, which was a little surprising to a lot of people, we had originally in the statement of interest put in for a 600-student 345 building. And when we got to that enrollment meeting, which is an enrollment certification meeting in order to come to an agreement between the school district and MSBA, they said to us, 600 is not going to do it. So they have all the data and all the background in the study, and they projected that we need something around 860 for a 345 based on the enrollment trends they see. So we're looking at the last 10 years enrollment dropping 13.7% in the district, and they project the next 10 years increasing 31.7%. So, that was something that, surprised a lot of us based on, the metrics they use. We also use NESDEC, which we use every year to get a projection. NESDEC does projections for over 400 districts in New England. They came up with the same results this year. Last year, they didn't. So this is just all new data that they have going through. They use birth cohort data, they use live births, they use number of females living in the town, all of that data to calculate that. So it's a lot higher than we anticipated.
One of the things that came out of that, just a question, I don't know that you even have the answer to it, but we've had the state do projections, long-term projections for towns like ours, where the projections were young people are going to the cities, towns are going to get older and older and basically become retirement communities. This seems like a projection that's undercutting that projection.
Absolutely. I think so. NESDEC has told us the last couple of years that there are 3 communities that have a high turnover of families and lots of kids under 18. It's Medfield, Sudbury, and Hopkinton. So Hopkinton just went through a building project a couple of years ago, early childhood center, and midway through the project, they had to add a whole other wing to the building because of their population explosion with kids. So I have a sense that MSBA learned from that because I think Hopkinton had a sense it was going to be a little bit more, and MSBA denied their request, and then they were scrambling mid-project. So they don't want that to happen again, so I feel like they wanted to, looking at the data, they felt like we were going to be in the same situation that Hopkinton was in the last couple of years. So I think from real estate people we talked to, it's still a pretty robust market, even winter. You drive down 109, you still see sale pending signs, even this time of year. So I know the spring will be as active as it has been the last couple of years.
And then the next phase coming up, the output of that is, or the outcome of that phase is what?
So feasibility study, once they do that, and Mike, about 9 months, 10 months, give or take?
Yeah, I think overall, but it's going to take us a little while to ramp up, get an owner's project manager on board and a design firm on board. I would figure it's probably a year as a frame of reference for when we'll get a completed feasibility study. Oh, thank you.
So my guess is that if everything goes smoothly, sometime around this year, we'll have that completed, with the end result being a location, a size of the school. We will have evaluated all the options, gotten town input, and we will have a projected budget, which is the next step. The next step is then going to the town and saying this is what we project our cost to be and getting it approved, and then going back to the MSBA and getting them to approve that to move to the next stage.
And the one component of the feasibility as well is that they're going to look at a 4-5 building and a 3-4-5 building. So we've asked them to look at both and give us a sense of what they think. The 3-4-5 makes so much sense because it frees up space in the other 2 buildings. We look at making Memorial pre-K to K early childhood center, which would allow us to run the programs we want to run. Make the Wheelock School a 1-2 and then a 3-4-5 in the new school. So it really, it takes care of that growth over the next 10 years at the elementary level.
I will add, Hopkinton was one of our projects, so we're very closely tied to it, and it's just about to complete and open. But what Jeff said is true. Usually, when you go to the MSBA with enrollment, the town is arguing for more enrollment with the MSBA than the MSBA wants to give you. This has been the exception to that, where they have come back with a projection that's above. And a lot of that has to do with some of these other projects that have encountered huge influxes of children that they weren't expecting.
So we're anticipating the kindergarten class next year. We've identified 203 students right now for that kindergarten class. Registration started today. We'll have a really good sense at the end of January what that number is going to be. We had 175 or so pre-register for that. So, that doesn't even count summer move-ins. So there's one projection, and we looked in the data that has, and I don't want to misquote the year, but it's a year, I think with 2023, I'm not sure if that's it, but it has the 3rd grade in that year at over 300 students. So if this all happens, we're going to need a 3-4-5 building.
Over and above the school construction, which is clearly the main point here, I have a secondary interest around location, because if suddenly the Dale Street School location, the current Dale Street School location opens up, next week we'll be hearing from actually Mike, you'll be hearing, the Affordable Housing Trust will be hearing this first, but going all the way to the other end of the demographics, the senior housing survey results, basically have significant interest by seniors in locating in close to town. So there's a logical possibility for how at least part of that property could be used. But I wasn't sure when we'd actually have any idea whether that's actually...
I would expect that as we go through this feasibility process, we have to go through the process of evaluating the existing school and get the MSBA to say, yes, we agree that it can't be modified and added to meet current needs. We highly expect that to happen just based on our understanding of what the school's needs are and the MSBA's history in terms of evaluating some of these old schools. They are moving more and more towards replacement because a lot of times you're throwing good money after bad to try to save some of these old schools. So that said, we have to go through the process and we have to vet it all out with all our due diligence. And once we get through that, I would expect that, certainly probably by late fall to maybe early winter of this year, we would expect to have a good understanding of the potential location for the school.
Right. Thanks.
And I noticed in the governor's inaugural address, one of the points he made was that there was a need to redo the education funding formula to give more monies to the cities. I think perhaps we ought to talk to our representatives and senator so that communities like Sudbury and Hopkinton and Medfield that are bearing an undue burden in terms of educating costs, educating children compared to many other suburban communities that have a much lower percentage. There ought to be some reflection of the percentage of the population that's in your public school system. And I know the cities will resist that because they want all the money for themselves. Now, some of them need it, but the Boston, Cambridge, Somervilles of this world are sitting on tons of money, and they don't need it, but they're the ones that will get it because they have the votes in the legislature. But the other thing that I'm afraid of for towns like Medfield is this carbon tax. Is it going to be like a 30 to 50% tax on gasoline to subsidize the people living in $1 million condos in Boston and Cambridge? So I think we need to have some serious discussions with our representatives and senator to make sure that they're addressing these problems and not just letting the city people push these changes through without any consideration for the problems that we're facing out here.
Do we need a motion to, is this another state, this is an SO, what are we signing, what's it called? SOI?
Feasibility study agreement.
Feasibility study agreement. And are we ready to? Sure. Okay. Yep. I move that the Board of Selectmen approve and sign the feasibility study agreement for the next phase of the MSBA process for the new school.
Second.
Roll call vote. Chairman Marcucci?
Aye.
Selectman Peterson?
Yes.
Selectman Murphy? Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you for coming,
it. Thanks.
Jeff. Let's see, then we're back to Selectmen's reports. Mr. Murphy.
He's up tomorrow.
I've got a series of items, some of which we don't necessarily need to run all the way to ground tonight, but I wanted to put them on the table. The first one I already partially mentioned, the senior housing survey is complete, and the formal next step is to let the Board of Selectmen review it and accept it or get any feedback that you'd like on the report. I think that you'll, speaking as the biased selectman who was the informally designated member of the committee, I think you'll like the report. Provides a lot of good information. Confirms a lot of what the prior report had, but not all, and provides a lot more in-depth detail than that first report did. So I think we have a pretty good picture of where things are at, and there's some good insights. Mike, the Affordable Housing Trust, I think, is going to see that report before we formally do. And that made sense to me because I think this is something, the sooner we get this out to people, the better. So Mike at least will see it officially before we see it officially here as Board of Selectmen.
Yes, it is on our agenda for the Affordable Housing Trust Board meeting this Thursday at 7:30.
Okay. The other thing I just wanted to briefly touch on, you all before this meeting, Mike and Pete, you got a copy of the November statement for our OPEB trust fund account from Prim. Coincidentally, the returns, our brilliance of the first 2 years where we were making those 12% returns every year, we got dumber this year, and in the last part of the year at least, the returns went down about $400,000. The good news was we made about a $400,000 contribution to Prim, so we're still holding steady at, $3.2 million of balance in the OPEB trust account, even with at least the market downturn in November.
Although you have, there, I believe a lot of those losses were unrealized losses. And if the PRIT holds on to those investments and they recover or they mature, they're not real losses, they're paper losses.
So we could be smarter about this than we're looking right now on paper. Okay.
Gus, Prim is the state pension people?
It's basically the state pension. When the OPEB Trust Committee, when we decided who we were going to go to, we looked at three potential providers of the investment management. The conventional wisdom here in the state is that you go to Prim. So we could have probably just done a kind of a no-brainer decision and gone to Prim, but the committee did not do that. We established a set of criteria. We looked at three. We looked at the Norfolk, I'm trying to remember the acronym. It's the
Plymouth County
PCOT. It was a newly formed investment for company taking advantage of some new IRS rules that basically would do the same thing that Prim did. They were getting started. We were a little leery of that for one reason, because if we had put our balance into that, we actually would have been, I think, the largest member of this newly formed conglomerate, even though they were claiming that they would deliver like a 1% better or 0.5% better return. We deferred on that because of the risk. And then we also went to one of the financial firms that the town uses for bonds, for some of holding things. And
Bartholomew.
They were a good option. We used them for that, but it appeared to us that Prim probably had a greater breadth of investment expertise. And so we wound up going with Prim for actually logical, objective reasons, and I think that decision's been proven out over the 2 years. The other reason I wanted to bring this up is the one point I will raise when we get to the budget discussion, and this is actually probably starts with a question for you, Mark, and certainly, Mike, you should weigh in, and Christine. My thought on the OPEB, given that we have a financial policy of funding OPEB, every year so far, what we've done is had a separate article in the warrant where we asked for approval of each year's annual contribution to OPEB. We've now formalized that into a financial policy on what we're going to do, and it would make sense to me that we would simply add or build in the OPEB account to the overall budget, town budget line. So rather than always treating it as a standalone article that has to be separately voted on, I think this year we'd have to vote it into that. I don't think we can just do it, but it would make sense to me that we would just build that in to our budget as one of the fundamental components.
Probably we just want to change the name of the Norfolk County budget, pension budget to something else that reflect the fact that it's Norfolk County and OPEB funding.
Is that something that has to be done by a taxpayer vote at the town meeting?
It's still a vote. I mean,
No, it's still a vote on the budget.
You're not calling it out.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pull over anybody's eyes. I'd just like to not have to go, it seems to me we don't need to go through the administrative hassle of a separate article when we have formalized the decision. And
We did the same thing when we took the beavers out of a special article and put it into an operating budget, so same process. You knew it was coming back there.
And that's when they started exploding. Now, beavers,
Right?
you don't want to explode, but retirement accounts, when they explode, that's a good thing. Okay.
As opposed to implode.
Yeah, right. So that was the next one. I guess I had just a very minor update on the State Hospital Development Committee. They are planning, I don't think I've heard a firm date yet, but the next meeting is planned for the end of January, which is what would start. Is it? Yeah, I never heard a confirmation, but it was like that last week of January, but that would kick off the discussion of following up with those discussions with the developers that responded to the RFI. Okay, yeah, that sounds right. So just so you know, that's where they're at in the process, and that's where the committee is headed. And then, Mike, you probably aren't, I'm not sure if we're prepared to run this all to ground, but I did want to make sure we didn't lose sight of the issue of the Historical Commission water bill. I think at least Mike, Pete, and I all received an email from David Temple that provided a lot of interesting background to include the circumstances under which the building that the Historical Commission meets in, what the provisions were when the town was given that.
We got to read Granville Daly's will.
Right. So my reading of that background information actually leads me to think that we should not force the Historical Commission to pay that bill. So I'll put a stake in the ground on that one. We have to figure out, I guess, how we get around having them not pay it, but because I don't know that the water department can just pretend that water hasn't been sold, but that seems to me not right that they should have to do it. The more significant question I have that'll be the curveball is when I read the deed, I guess, that transferred the property over, that basically designated that the Historical Commission would have free use of a building. I question whether the Historical Commission should have had to pay the $12,000 for the roof that they've already paid.
They're under a lease. We have a lease with them, and that they've agreed as part of that lease to be responsible for building maintenance.
And I believe utilities.
Yeah.
And water is a utility.
So it seems to me that runs counter to what the agreement was when we got the deed of gift. The deed of gift says that condition is not a condition that's a binding condition.
What's
So
Granville
legally,
Daly? I haven't seen these documents. My understanding was that was a bank originally.
what I'm going to do is I'll give you.
Yeah,
you can look at it more.
the Historical Society was what is now the reading room in the existing library.
Yeah. So my point is,
Well, that's the room, and that's the library. They're in an old bank.
If you look back through, you'll see what I'm talking about. David Temple sent a lot of interesting information, which at least, if for nothing else, is interesting historic information, but it includes the actual legal document that transferred it. That legal document basically says that I'm transferring this, but the Historical Commission shall have free use of a they actually say
room in the library.
Yeah.
That's where it came from. So the carryover is, well, so we don't have the room in the library, but we've got this other building, so that's the equivalent of it, so it should all carry over to that. And that's, I don't think, frankly, it may sound like it makes sense, but legally, I'm not sure about the underpinnings of it.
The statement basically says it's not a binding condition. So clearly, the issue I'm putting on the table is just over 100 years ago. This property was donated by a leader in town under certain conditions that gave the Historical Commission a place to be. And that was the part that went along with it. This is not a legal issue. This is a moral, I'll call it a moral issue, or I'll call it an issue having to do with just the overall town and the trust and the commitment it has to past people who have donated something to the town. I'm not automatically saying that everything has to be free, but when I read that, I said, this is a group of volunteers who uphold the heritage of this town through their volunteer efforts, who work to raise money to do what they have done, which includes provide $12,000 to maintain a town building. We ought to, recognize that, and for myself, we shouldn't be nickel and diming them after they put $12,000 into a roof to pay a $900 water bill, which is really a function of the billing process, because they only use something like 150 gallons of water.
Yeah, the other compelling thing is that they use very, very little water. I thought we were waiting to hear back from the water and sewer, that the water and sewer was going to take it up and then bring it back to us, and then we were going to figure it out.
Any discussion they've had so far has been they're opposed to waiving it because they feel it would set a precedent that would apply to other groups.
So
Dwight
has
Derby
water
has,
and sewer
Lowell
dealt with it,
Mason
and
has, the
are they
soccer
giving it back
league.
to us?
I don't think since they've come back to full complement that they've dealt with it. They haven't dealt with it within the last few months that I'm aware of. I think it was prior when they were not at full complement. I would note that I think my opinions or discussions are somewhat mischaracterized in this letter. I didn't take a position on.
I wasn't calling that out, Mark. I was calling out the other.
No, but you know, we've all, Mike's been involved in these discussions, I've been involved in them, they've been going on for a long time. And also, as long as, you know, below radar, but of much more significance, in my opinion, is the fact that the Dwight Derby house is in a posture that needs to be addressed at some point, sooner rather than later as well. And that's much more significant.
So again, I'm not trying to drive to a decision tonight, but I wanted to put this on the table, seeing as we've had it on our agenda for at least a month. My own personal view is we should not continue to burden the Historical Commission with a $900 water
This is
bill.
Historical Society.
Excuse me, yes.
They're two different groups.
I know. Historic, I have to get between historic and historical. I've been working on the first word.
Don't get hysterical on us.
Yeah. So my point is that it's a $900 bill, and in essence, it's a $900 bill that's an artifact. They'd be better off buying Poland Springs water and using it to flush their toilets.
A lot of
without
people
using anything than to pay this. And we ought to just take this off.
A lot of homeowners who are billed use very little water and are billed a minimum would make the same argument that they shouldn't have to pay that amount.
This one,
that
this is a little
$900
different for me, given the deed and given the fact these are volunteers trying to preserve the history of Medfield.
Right. That $900, by the way, is not 1 year. I believe it's 3 or 4 years. So it's like $140 a year or something, or $200 a year.
Water charge is what I understood every year.
Right, yeah. You're billed for 10,000 gallons. And the theory is that the water and sewer system is 75 miles of pipes, pump stations, water towers, and all that has to be maintained whether you use a gallon or 100,000 gallons. You still have your basic capital costs that go on regardless.
So to be clear, what I'm getting at is I don't think we want to grind this down through a detailed bureaucratic discussion of procedures of the water department. I'm saying we need to look at this with a broader view, that this is a group of people who volunteer their time to preserve the heritage of Medfield. We're granted something as part of a deed of gift to the town, that they're supposed to get something for free. Now, maybe that's not, they're not guaranteed to get that building, so it's a room, I get that. But I would rather not have this thing hang over their heads longer than it needs to, because I think, A, it's a minor issue, and I think the value of what these folks are doing for the town justifies us working very hard to just make this problem go away on a sustained basis.
Yeah, and it hasn't been hanging around that long, given the fact that the bill's 5-6 years old or something, so that it's only been on our plate for several months. And we're waiting to hear back from the Water and Sewer Board to get some input from them on
It
it.
started when David Temple became president of the society.
Well, I don't know how long he's been president, but it only got to us a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So,
He's been bouncing around water and sewer for a while. He's met with himself a few times, so. But I'd say 2 or 3 years.
The resolution coming from that direction will be a bureaucratic resolution about, well, this is how we do things. And here the calculation is correct. And I'm saying there's a bigger issue here about volunteers doing something that is very valuable to the town. And this process leads them to a spot where their job is you have to go raise money so that you can pay the town for basically almost no water. It'd almost be better if we just shut the water off there and told them to use the bathroom in the library.
Pay the town for a wash.
Yeah. So you see what, again, I'm not driving for it. I'm trying to get this discussion and this consideration at a level that I think is more important.
as a first step, I think we need to hear back from Water and Sewer, and then we can have this philosophical discussion about.
And can we ask Water and Sewer to tell us what their answer is next week?
They just met
They just
today.
met last night, though, or
I
this
don't think
morning.
they'll be meeting again.
They've known the
That was
issues,
this morning.
if we've known the issues been there for 2 months, they've known the issues there. And so when we say we got to hear back from water and water sewer, it sits on it longer than we do, it should not be an unreasonable question. If they literally can't get an answer until they meet again, then tell us that next week. This is a $900 bill.
Anything else on your agenda?
No. Thank you.
Okay. I would just mention that I had my Selectmen office hours last Friday. Nate Bassinet came, and we talked about, and actually I suggested that he should join the safety committee, and I discovered he'd already been in touch with Mike Marcucci about joining the safety committee, so that worked out well. And I actually got a spam email that talked about that stuff that you were telling me about on Friday, so I'm learning more about that. I had a very interesting meeting last night with Rich Mastronardi, who's some sort of leadership position at the First Parish Meeting House. I'm not quite sure what his title is, executive board chair or something of that sort. And he showed me the 1600s desk and the 1746 Bible that they bought recently for around $6,000 at an eBay auction. And they would like to find a suitable place in town to display it, and they were wondering if maybe the library was the appropriate place. I told him that he should get in touch with the people at the library, and that he should get in touch and talk to Chris and Mike about how to move forward with it. And I suggested to him that it would be actually very interesting for people if he would bring it here to a selectmen's meeting, and we could then have it shown on Medfield TV. I'm wondering how it ended up. It's a desk that, I mean, it's about maybe almost 3 feet wide by a couple feet deep, and then it has a slanted top, and then inside it's got all these cubby holes for things. And it was apparently used as a desk in the minister's office. And about 50 years ago, it somehow separated from the parish meeting house in ways that are still unknown. But
there are a lot of interesting artifacts around town like that. For example, we have a wooden snowplow that's in the Roy Derby house that someone in Westwood found in their garage and gave it to Medfield, and they restored that. And it's quite an interesting thing to see. They have the old hand pump fire pumper up at the fire station. And then I believe the Unitarian Church papers are in the Historical Society, and they're fascinating.
Scanned by a group in the state level.
Yeah.
If anyone's interested in this desk, if you go to eBay and track that listing down, one of the things that was interesting about it is that a couple people in town, and one former Medfield High School graduate that I know, Mark Agostini, they spotted this thing for sale on eBay on like a Friday, and the deadline was Sunday night. So it was a weekend. This thing initially was, I forget, $1,200 or something like that, but nobody knows what it is. So there was this scramble trying to marshal, money that could collect. So imagine trying to raise $5,000 or $6,000 in Medfield on a weekend. What was it, early or mid-fall, when everybody's out doing things? But that's what happened. But if you go to the listing, there's a complete there's multi-page history.
A very detailed explanation of it.
Yeah, it goes all the way back. It tells the evolution of the Unitarian Church and how the thinking of the church leaders in Medfield changed from decade to decade, and it was actually kind of interesting, because in some ways, if you think of the Unitarian Church as being a fairly progressive, open-minded, church, it actually has roots that go back hundreds of years, where for the time you still had rebels that were pushing for new theologies or modified theologies. It's a fascinating read. So, if you care about that.
Split with the Congregationalists and split with the Baptists, and I mean, it was a whole series of splits there.
Those splits oftentimes resulted in lawsuits over who owned the silver and that sort of thing. I think Dedham had a big suit over that when they split apart.
Well, there was some kind of a challenge in Medfield because there was a tax that everyone had to pay to support the First Parish Church, and the Baptists opposed it and said, why should we have to pay a tax to support a church that we disagree with? So, I mean, there's a fascinating history on some of these things. The cemetery, you know, all that the trust is doing on the cemetery is fascinating too. The things where we only have one cemetery, most communities have several.
So Rich told me that he has a video of his discussion with the seller. The seller apparently is somebody who dealt in a ton of Pilgrim and Puritan materials and just was very knowledgeable. And as part of, at one point spoke to Darlene Lewis, I think is her name, who was involved in acquiring it. And my first question is, how do you know that it's real? How do you know the provenance? And she explained to me the process that you go through when you're involved in this type of acquisition and a lot of it's on the faith of the seller. But clearly they had huge discussions with the seller, and one of the things that Rich has apparently is this video of the seller that could be connected to the exhibit, and you could set it up certainly with a QR code or something so that anybody with a cell phone could listen to the seller's explanation of what it is, and I guess the guy only sold it because there was something else that he wanted more, and he needed the money to buy this other thing.
So, I saw in the paper too, there was someone bought a couple of portraits of a husband and wife and brought them back to the original house.
I just saw that too.
Fascinating, yeah.
Well, that was the fellow from who was the sports writer for the Globe, I think.
Yes, yeah, Lee Montville.
Yeah, and he's going to be lecturing at the Historical Society in another month or so, another week or so, in February, I think. And then the last thing I would mention is that we all got an email from someone named Stephen Reish this afternoon, just expressing appreciation for the fact that all the Selectmen materials are now available online. So thank you, Chris and Evelyn and Mike for making that work.
I'll give all the credit to them.
To all of you guys. So.
I'm not quite a Luddite like Sorrell, but I'm close.
So is there anything more that we need to do? You guys want to bring us up to date on the informational things? Mike? What about Mike?
Oh, Mike.
Oh, we already said he didn't.
Oh, he did? Oh, I missed that.
Oh, we didn't? No, okay.
I am still here,
Gus just wanted to see if you were still awake, I guess.
I missed that you didn't have a report. I'm very sorry I missed, I was not there in person for the Historical Society water bill discussion.
Well, we'll discuss it again when you get back, Mike, then.
So just for the record, this...
For your information, Gus is making gestures towards your speaker.
You just had two fingers show up behind your head, metaphorically.
Chris, anything on the informational that you want to share with people?
No, everything is fairly self-explanatory in that we put on the website.
Right. Anything else to come before this body?
I believe so.
The budgets are coming in quite well. They're just about all in now, aren't they? Yeah. And I put together a rough draft of a warrant for you people to review, and I've given it to Evelyn and Chris and Mark. So
yeah, we got draft copies too. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and there's been some additions since then too. So Mike, Selectman Marcucci had one about the nomination from the Affordable Housing Committee, the Affordable Housing Trust, that needs to be amended. And Mark had one, the Water Sewer Board had one about fire hydrants, regulation of fire hydrants. So.
Just blocking them. It's actually not even a water and sewer, it's more of a public safety article.
But it looks like it's going to be a fairly sizable warrant. I believe no school articles. And I don't know, we're not sure water and sewer is going to be ready to go forward with their...
We don't know yet for the water tower.
Yeah. But those are the two big monetary ones that we're facing this year. Water and sewer was, I don't think we'll be coming in with any additional money for their projects.
So I had two questions.
Yeah,
about
go ahead. I have one more thing too, I just realized.
Real quick, detailed questions that probably Christine or Mike, you might know. The GFS, this is all having to do with the informational stuff we got. The GFS Geological Field Services report, it has to do with the study they did at Anton Cleaners. The only question I had, they copied the library, and I was wondering why the library got copied, but I'm assuming it's because the library keeps...
A repository.
That's a repository. And then the other question I had was around this MIA stuff, around the report of the nominating committee for MIA and Pete.
Maya.
Or Maya. Okay. And they were looking for nominees for this, on the insurance. The first question I had is, do we have any reason that we'd want to nominate anyone other than go with the nominees that they've suggested? I'm thinking no, but I'm just
Only if
asking.
you had a particular interest of people with expertise that wanted to participate in the insurance
Okay.
management.
Yeah, the one I could think of, and I'm not sure he has the time right now to do it, would be Peter Moran, the insurance advisor.
I don't think Peter's eligible. I think they're looking for,
Who's this, workers' comp and property and casualty?
no, Mass Municipal Association.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's actually for MMA.
Oh, it's not
okay.
Maya?
No.
Oh, because it says Maya.
It comes out of Maya, but it's done at the Mass Municipal. They're not looking for our own people. They've already come up with their
That's right.
nominee.
But my question was, is there anything about what
Yeah, they're not
the people you recommend that we have heartburn about that we want to?
No.
And then the next question, there's a place in here that talks about designating a selectman to vote. And I assume it's voting at the annual meeting.
the annual meeting.
My first thought
I
was to
designated
nominate
you to vote already.
Oh, you did. I was going to have you do it.
So the way it worked was that Mike Sullivan gave me the card.
Okay.
And the card, I think, had on it the ability to designate somebody to vote, and I knew that you were going to be at the lunch, and so I designated you.
Okay.
So that means when you walk in, you'll get a red card.
He threw it at me before I could throw it at him. I thought I was going to bushwhack you right in this meeting in the public, and you've already done it. Okay.
Maybe that'll give you preferred seating at the meal.
It might. I'm glad I asked the question, so I know that I've got the ball. Thank you. That's all I had.
So then the last thing I would mention is that the Medfield Foundation annually runs a program to seek to celebrate volunteers in Medfield. And the Medfield Volunteer Awards then holds a reception in March, towards the end of March, to celebrate the people that are nominated by the public for the honor. And the nominees are open through the end of January. If anybody wants to nominate some exceptional volunteer that is special to you, please look at the Medfield Foundation website, which is probably medfieldfoundation.org, but there's a form there, and you can just do it all online, and then come to the reception and celebrate them in person. It's oftentimes the descriptions of what people do by the nominators and the nominees are just magical in terms of moving descriptions of why people do different things. So that's in the works. Anything else, or are we done?
I have nothing else.
Roll call.
I move that we close the meeting.
Second.
Chairman Marcucci.
Aye.
Selectman Peterson.
Yes.
Selectman Murphy. Aye. The motion that carries.
The preceding was a production of Medfield TV.